What are you wanting the response to be tomorrow when this is happening?
Yeah, we want everyone to be hashtagging. Because we have had to limit the scope of the people involved, we've had to greatly expand the outreach that comes out of the University of Utah, which means we've enlisted every student on campus to tweeting out the debate2020.utah.edu to our website to get materials to see just some unique aspects of the state of Utah and about this site. We also will have viewing parties, virtual viewing parties all over campus from all of our departments where people will be able to watch together, interact with each other virtually. We even sent out a watch kit to all of our students and all of our VIPs, bingo cards for words that will be said, glasses, treats, those kinds of things. We've had to be very creative when it comes to the engagement for our students and the people who are interested in it, but I think we're going to capture it.
Being a university, is there any extra credit for the students who attend?
Well, the extra credit is the fact they got this ticket. This is one of those tickets you cannot buy. These right now, over 60 students right now were notified last night that they are going to be getting a ticket. And this is a random drawing from over 4,000 students to put their name in to be drawn. This is the luckiest ticket in town. And my hope is that every one of these students really appreciates what a significant opportunity it is.
All right, Mr. Perry, anything else you'd like to tell me about the debate or the university or anything in general?
I think you did a great job.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Hello, everyone. My name is Pilar.
All right, and looks like people are streaming in now to the debate venue. You're seeing people take their seats. Here's a much closer vantage point than we saw earlier. There are those plexiglass panels that we were mentioning earlier. A nice pan across the stage. These debates are put on by the Commission for Presidential Debates. It's a bipartisan nonprofit group. Daytona didn't know if this one would have happened due to the president's COVID diagnosis.
Sure, we just mentioned a little bit earlier that the CDC did finally clear Mike Pence. Of course, there have been several coronavirus cases right there at the White House. This virus does not discriminate.
That's right, Daytona. And we know the vice president and both Senator Kamala Harris have tested negative before this debate. And we have our own Fox's Maddie Rivera. She is live for us in Salt Lake City. She follows around the Biden campaign, but she's going to give us a debate preview of what she thinks is going to happen. Maddie, thanks so much for being with us today.
Happy to join, Andrew.
Now, Maddie, can you kind of talk about some of the preparations that Senator Harris has been going through all week? I mean, she's been in Salt Lake City for a number of days. What are the preparations like?
Yeah, she's been laying low over the past few days since she's arrived in Salt Lake City, but she is expected to call out Pence and Trump's record on the coronavirus. In fact, last week she got advice from former Secretary Hillary Clinton, and, Kamala Harris is basically just preparing herself for whatever Pence might throw at her this evening. There was a debate preview call that happened this morning, and one of the things that Harris advisors wanted to say was that they have to be aware that Pence will be a formidable challenger. They say he's not like Trump, who kind of goes off the rails a little bit. They say Pence talks eloquently. He'll deliver his attacks in fuller sentences. And so the problem with that, they say, is that it's a little harder to spot what they think are the mistruths. So they say that will be Harris's challenge tonight, is to be able to spot that out quickly, call it out, and of course deliver a rebuttal, Andrew.
Now, Madeline, I have a question for you. We've been talking about this debate, and if it would even happen, do you believe personally, did you think it was going to happen?
Personal thoughts? I think we all were just waiting to see what would happen. There have obviously been a lot of questions, especially after President Trump was diagnosed with COVID-19 last week. But immediately after that, Senator Kamala Harris took her test for coronavirus, and so did Vice President Mike Pence, and both tested negative. And so that day, as they were cleared from the coronavirus, it became a little more apparent that perhaps this first and only vice presidential debate would actually happen. And so here we are. But as for the second presidential debate, I think that still remains in question. Obviously, a lot of it will depend on Trump's health and how he fares in a little more than a week. So a lot of eyes will be on that and to see if it will actually happen. But we haven't heard of any updates for now with the schedule yet, Daytona.
Maddie, one more question for you. We heard from Joe Biden yesterday talking to reporters, and we want to play that sound for you as well, that we have that saying that if, the president isn't recovered from the coronavirus and he still tests positive, he doesn't know if the next debate will happen. And we'll get your thoughts after we play that.
Well, I think if he still has COVID, we shouldn't have a debate. In a debate, I think, by the way, I think we're going to have to follow very strict guidelines. Too many people have been infected, and it's a very serious problem. And so I'll be guided by the guidelines of the Cleveland Clinic and what the docs say the right thing to do, if and when he shows up for debate. So thank you.
Maddie, your thoughts on that going forward into next week?
Well, it's consistent with what Biden has been saying all along, that people have to listen to the scientists. And as long as protocols are followed, then of course, why not hold the debate? He's looking forward to it. This is kind of his strength anyway, these town hall type of debates, these town hall type of settings where he really gets to interact with the voters here. So what he said is not really inconsistent with what he said before. Now, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's really in disagreement with what the former vice president said there, that if he's still positive for the coronavirus, then why hold a debate and possibly put everyone else at risk? So I think a lot of experts would actually agree with that. But again, we'll just have to see how Trump actually does over the next few days. Those next few days will be critical. Regardless, Trump is still finding a way to get in front of the American people. Just a few hours ago, or maybe about an hour ago, regardless, earlier today, he tweeted a video about his recovery process. And so he's still finding a way to get in front of the American people, get some FaceTime with them, even through a digital platform. So they're still very active regardless. And so we'll have to see what happens next week. But again, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find someone who actually disagrees with what the former vice president is saying, that you just kind of have to listen to the experts and make sure everyone is safe, Andrew.
All right, Fox's Madeline Rivera live for us in Salt Lake City ahead of the debate tonight. She follows around the Biden campaign. Thanks for that update, Maddie.
Thank you.
And you didn't see it, but we just saw it in one of our feeds, but the vice presidential motorcade has come up to the University of Utah, and so Mike Pence is there. And Maddie brought up a great point. Senator Kamala Harris, she was on the primary debate stage, fending off those scores of challengers on the Democratic side. She's now Joe Biden's running mate. She was up against Joe Biden for the last year. He picked her, but Pence has done this before. Pence did it in 2016 with Senator Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's running mate. So this is a huge national stage for Senator Harris that Mike Pence is already used to.
Yeah, some saying this vice presidential debate could be the most influential in history. That's a big statement, but a lot of people are saying it right now, and a lot of people predicting things about what's going to happen on stage. We want to tell you about Fox Bet. This is something that, of course, our Fox family is kind of stepping into right now. We actually spoke with the CEO, Kip Levin, and this is what it looks like. We pulled it up for you during the presidential debate, but this one is for the vice presidential, and probably just as many exciting things will happen with that too. And so in Orlando, one of our fellow digital journalists sat down with him to just kind of talk about what you can do with this awesome app.
This is News Now's Regina Gonzalez, and we'll take that for you now.
Now from Fox host Regina Gonzalez, joined today by interim CEO of Fox Bet, Mr. Kip Levin. How are you today, Mr. Levin?
Hi, doing well, thanks, Regina. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for chatting with me. Now we're discussing the app Fox Bet Super 6, which allows viewers of tonight's vice presidential debate to participate in a challenge and win cash prizes. Now, I know this was an option during last week's presidential debate. So, Mr. Levin, can you tell me and the viewers how this challenge works?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun, free to play, easy to use game that we have as part of our Fox Bet Super 6 app, which is available to download in the app stores. It's been really popular for us in sports. So it was originally built to support our NFL broadcast.
All right, we have Dr. Ed. Alrighty, you're watching news now from Fox. We're going to head back to that interview in just a second. We punched the gun a little bit early. We've got a debate coach interview that we did as well. So for now, we're going to head back to that Fox Bet interview.
Fox host Regina Gonzalez, joined today by interim CEO of Fox Bet, Mr. Kip Levin. How are you today, Mr. Levin?
Hi, doing well, thanks, Regina. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for chatting with me. Now we're discussing the app Fox Bet Super 6, which allows viewers of tonight's vice presidential debate to participate in a challenge and win cash prizes. Now, I know this was an option during last week's presidential debate. So, Mr. Levin, can you tell me and the viewers how this challenge works?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun, free to play, easy to use game that we have as part of our Fox Bet Super 6 app, which is available to download in the app stores. It's been really popular for us in sports. So it was originally built to support our NFL broadcasts and to give people nationwide an option to sort of play along in a free game that feels a bit like you're placing picks in a bet, but is free and you can win real money. And so I think given the interest that we knew there would be in the presidential debate, we built a game for that. By far and away, it exceeded all of our expectations in terms of how many people signed up and played along. And so, we knew that there would be an equal amount of interest in the debate tonight. And so given the success we had last week, we're doing it again.
Great. Now, how there are probably so many participants. How do you determine the results and who wins how much money?
Yeah, so we set up a prize pool. It's $25,000, and it really depends on how many winners. So for the debate contest last week, we had close to 500,000 people enter. We had about 750 winners, so everybody won $33, I think was the total, which is great. So it'll depend on how many people win. And I think we made the questions a bit harder, so we might have fewer winners tonight, but we'll see. So it just depends on how many winners there will be. There are 6 questions. Everybody's answering the same questions, right? So we score it in real time, so you can see how you're doing as you're playing along, and we will see. But the interest already is really phenomenal to see.
Now, what are some of these questions? What can people expect to try and answer?
Yeah, I mean, we try to mix it up between things that are topical, right? So that people can try their skills out in terms of what they think each of the candidate will say first, for example, is a popular question, right? Which and we will list a number of different topics or keywords that are sort of part of the news cycle, and then we do things that we try to mix that in with some fun ones too, right? Like the type of games that people might be playing at home. So it's a mix between topical questions and just make it a little fun. It's obviously a serious event and an important time given everything going on, but I think it allows people to have a little enjoyment while they're playing or while they're watching.
Now, how did this work? Last week was the first presidential debate. How did this challenge go last week for you guys?
I mean, it really exceeded our expectations. We put it up. We obviously leveraged the news to promote it. I think we really had no expectations in terms of how many people would sign up and play along, and I think we had close to 500,000, so that was well above what we expected. And the interesting thing actually is that somebody who signed up for the debate last week also played our NFL contest this past weekend, and she ended up winning the $100,000 jackpot on our weekly NFL game. So I think people are interested in a lot of different things. We cover a lot, mostly sports, but we've been really pleased with the interest in and around the debates.
Winning 100,000 is definitely a good weekend in my book.
You had a very good weekend.
Now, following last week, what can we expect with the vice presidential debate tonight?
Yeah, so I think, again, just from an event perspective, I can't remember in my lifetime, a vice presidential debate during the cycle is getting as much discussion and interest as this one. So, and I think the numbers, if you look at already the participation, I mean, we're trending to get as many people tonight as we had playing the game, for the presidential debate. So I think, it's, again, exceeding expectations, and, we'll see where we end up. But right now, I think we're close to already over 350,000 people who have signed up, and we expect a lot more as we get closer to the debate tonight.
Great. Now, is there anything else the public needs to know? Talk again how they can participate in this. Download the app.
Yeah, so it's Fox Bet Super 6. It's available nationwide. So we have a sports betting business that is a joint venture between our parent company and with Fox. The sports betting Fox Bet apps are available in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Colorado, but the Fox Bet Super 6 is a free-to-play game. So it's nationwide. It's really, really easy. You can see the video of the woman who won, and she talked about how easy it was for her to just do it for the debate last week, but then do it again for the NFL contest this past weekend. And it's available in the App Store to download on both Apple and Google. And so, no reason why you shouldn't be taking a crack at trying to win the 25,000. And obviously there are lots of other contests that you can play. Major League Baseball during the playoffs as well. And then all of the NFL. We have a Thursday night contest, and we'll have a big one again this weekend too. So
great. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, that's it. Enjoy, and we'll see how everything goes tonight.
Well, thank you so much for making time for us.
Yeah, thanks for.
All right, we have Dr. Ed Lee here. He is a debate coach out of Emory University. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So what are your expectations for the upcoming debate?
My expectations are actually pretty high. I think that both of these individuals are seasoned professionals. I think that they have contrasting communication styles that will make for a very entertaining debate. And I think that they have a vested interest to do a course correction of what we saw last time we gathered together for a debate.
Yeah, how do you see this being different than the presidential debate?
Woo! The presidential debates turned out to be a verbal wrestling match. I think that this will be the policy debate that we were all craving for, that Mike Pence is the rhetorical foil to President Trump, and Kamala Harris is a prosecutor who engages in cross-examination and loves the notion of evidence. So I think that we are actually going to see a debate that is about the policies and about two different sets of values around the policies.
So you kind of touched it right there, but what are the attack methods that you expect from each candidate right there?
Mike Pence is brilliant at that Midwestern folksy, I'm going to tear you down without you knowing that's what I'm doing. And it's so effective at challenging arguments and dismissing arguments without coming across as being rude or, dare I say, nasty. And Kamala Harris, if you viewed any of her cross-examinations in the Senate, you see that she is very aggressive in the way in which she challenges, takes down, and probes the people that she is cross-examining, and that will be the contrast between them.
So let's talk about that white elephant that's in the room, President Trump's COVID diagnosis. How do you see Kamala Harris kind of stepping into that zone and utilizing that in her favor?
This is an interesting communication dilemma that I think that she has to talk about COVID-19, but she can't talk about it in a way that dismisses the fact that our president is ill and sick and still is belabored. And so how does she talk about that while acknowledging sympathies and an understanding is a difficult challenge, but I think that she will. And I think that the way in which she will talk about this is the way in which we all need to be hyper aggressive and vigilant in the way in which we're dealing with this, and that we can't be flippant and dismissive, and that there have been some times in which she believes that the president has done that.
Do you see this being a different vibe altogether? We're going to have that plexiglass that's separating them, and they're also going to be further apart. How is that going to change this debate specifically?
I hope that it lowers the temperature on the conversation a good bit, and I think that it will. I actually don't think that the plexiglass and the distancing is necessary to do that. I think that that would already be there. But I do think that it helps to do that. The vibe that we will see is a vibe of the presidential debates of the bygone era, where there was an elevated notion of civility and a respect for the office that the candidates are striving to hold, even if there's not respect for the candidates themselves. And I also think that both candidates desperately have a desire to have a course correction over last week, that they understand that their two candidates at the top of the ticket didn't do their parties a service with the way in which they comported themselves, and that they're going to go a different direction.
So last week we talked about how both presidential candidates were preparing for the debate. How is it different for these vice presidential candidates in preparing for this one?
I think that their first strategy is to do no harm. That the reality is that the vice presidential debate, very few people actually make a decision based upon who's on the VP ticket. And the question is, are we talking about things that the VP candidate did that overwhelms what the presidential candidate wants to talk about? So do no harm is the first thing that they're going to be talking about. Kamala Harris has a different set of goals and objectives. She's the turnout voter for folks in the urban areas of our city, whether Atlanta, where I spend a good bit of time, or in the Oakland, LA area where she spent some time. How is she ginning up interest or Joe Biden amongst that collection of people, and that she is going to work to do that? And I think some of the things that she talks about will speak to that.
So say you're the debate coach for Pence, and then you're the debate coach for Harris. What are your kind of last words to them before they take that stage?
For Mike Pence, it is to recite many of the things that Donald Trump talked about in the first presidential debate, but do it in that down-home, folksy sort of way that he is used to. And that will be easy for Mike Pence because he has done that for 4 years and been very successful at doing that. For Kamala Harris, it really is to enjoy the moment. This is a historic moment where we have the first Asian American on a presidential or vice presidential debate stage and the first Black woman. Enjoy the history of this particular moment and try not to allow it to overwhelm you.
Do you think that will ultimately play in her favor?
I actually think that it will. I think that she is going to do very well. I don't know who wins or loses this debate, but I do think that the country is in for a treat. And I hope that a lot of people tune in are not discouraged, because these are two people who are really interested in talking about the policies, and they're interested in talking about them in very different ways from very different perspectives. And this is what debates should be about. So I am hopeful. And I hope that Vice President Pence and Senator Harris will not let me down and will not let the country down in having us understand the role of debate and the value that it can play in us making better decisions.
All righty, Dr. Ed Lee right there, a debate coach from Emory University. Sure to be an exciting night, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Daytona, that was a great discussion with Dr. Ed Lee out of Emory University. We're bringing you all these experts and their insights before the vice presidential debate tonight in just about 30 minutes. It's 5:30 here on the West Coast in Phoenix, 8:30 in New York.
Yeah, so we spoke briefly about the difference between Senator Kamala Harris and, of course, Mike Pence. They're in different parties, but they also are very different in the way that they are probably going to debate tonight. Different attack methods, different topics are going to be on the table tonight. We don't know exactly what they're going to be speaking about, but we got some insight from political experts from around the country. You got to sit down with a bunch of them virtually, of course, and speak about what will happen.
Let's play that for you right now. I'm Andrew Kraft, a digital journalist with News Now from Fox, and we are joined today ahead of the vice presidential debate in Salt Lake City, Utah, at the University of Utah, by KTVU Fox 2's Greg Lee, Craig Patrick out of Fox 13 in Tampa, and Tom Fitzgerald out of Fox 5 in D.C., some of the best political reporters around the country. And it's just a couple of hours before the first vice presidential debate between Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris. Tom, wanted to start with you. Obviously, the major story and the backdrop of this debate will be the president's positive COVID-19 diagnosis and his hospitalization at Walter Reed. How is this changing campaigning for each candidate? And, you know, we really didn't know if these debates were even going to be happening going forward, Tom.
Well, you're right about that, Andrew. And, you know, the first presidential debate now seems like a month ago, and it's, you know, been less, you know, than a week. Look, this entire campaign has been turned over topsy-turvy again by this blockbuster news in the past couple of days of the president being diagnosed with COVID-19. Now, as we know, the president returned to the White House via Marine One on Monday night, but that is where he is right now. The Trump campaign train, for all intents and purposes, is parked right now until the president can make a full recovery from the coronavirus. So that really sets the stage for what's going to happen in this vice presidential debate. Not only at how high the stakes are on this, but also the very issue of the vice presidency. Andrew, we probably had more talk about the 25th Amendment this week than I can remember in my adult life, and that has to do with the fact that the President of the United States' health was in jeopardy, you know, over the past couple of days, and people were asking real serious questions about the vice presidency, about this vice president, and also, let's not forget, on the Democratic ticket, you know, Joe Biden's in his upper 70s. These two candidates, when they sit down against each other the other night, they both could be theoretically potential presidents at some point. So the stakes for this could not be higher.
That's right, Tom. I mean, you heard pundits all this week and over the weekend saying this is the most important vice presidential debate we have seen in modern times, just like you said, because of this, you know, hypothetical line of succession arguments, what would happen. Both of the candidates are in their 70s. But I wanted to bring it back to the president's record, and we could probably go over to Craig or Greg, but how well is Mike Pence a steward of the president's record? We've seen him campaigning in the president's stead while he's recovering from the coronavirus, but how well can that come across at the debate stage tonight?
Well, I'll lead off. Look, it came across very well 4 years ago, didn't it? And Vice President Pence has shown time and time again he is very good at defending the president's record. And the central issue, of course, is COVID-19, particularly with the president's diagnosis. And the vice president happens to be the chair of the coronavirus task force. Right. He is very, very versed in all of this and prepared to take it on. I think looking back 4 years ago, you would give a slight victory in the vice presidential debate to the now vice president of the United States. He is very good, very on point, based on his background in radio. He knows how to communicate very well, and you will notice he speaks without pauses between his sentences, particularly in debate settings, that doesn't really give another candidate or even a moderator chance easily to jump back in and redirect or follow up with questions. All of that, I think, works in the vice president's favor, but we don't know to what extent Kamala Harris, the senator from California, now vice presidential nominee for the Democratic ticket, will go after President Trump herself. Her role traditionally as the running mate is to serve as the attack dog, but now that you have a president now recovering from a serious condition, to what extent will she tone it down? We believe she will somewhat. We also have no idea what impact this all will have on the race. That is the president's condition. It depends largely on his continual path to recovery, but this is something that on one hand could undermine the president's argument that we've turned the corner on the pandemic when he and so many in his inner circle have caught it themselves. On the other hand, it can generate sympathy for the president, bring down the temperature of the opposition to him. He may not be getting hammered as much in much of the media as he has been for most of the past 3+ years. And with that, in illness, sometimes people reevaluate their thinking on things. Sometimes other people reevaluate the person who is sick. We certainly saw in 1981 when President Reagan recovered from an assassination attempt. He had a groundswell of sympathy and support, an extended honeymoon. To what extent this will either work for or against the president just remains entirely unclear. And I think both Vice President Pence and Senator Harris have that in mind when they decide to what extent to go after one another, and certainly Senator Harris and her thoughts in going after directly President Trump.
Greg, want to bring you in here,
yeah,
though.
Andrew, and I'll jump in here. You're going to see two very,
just to go off that, you know, you're a reporter in the Bay Area. Senator Kamala Harris is from the Bay Area. She served as the you know, San Francisco District Attorney and the Attorney General of California. In the Bay Area, you know, the campaign, the Trump campaign has just been hammering Senator Harris on her record as a prosecutor, as the Attorney General, but also saying that she isn't hard enough on these, you know, Antifa types, these radical Democrats who we've seen all summer have been, you know, causing violence in cities across the country. But how will her record stand today?
Well, and I think the Trump and Pence campaign have been sort of trying to figure out what sticks, right, in terms of attacks against Senator Kamala Harris. She called herself the top cop when she was the Attorney General. And progressives, for the most part, were very unhappy with her during that time for not stepping in to investigate fatal police shootings. But they've also compared her to a Trojan horse for the left. And that's been an argument that we've heard a lot from the Trump campaign about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that their progressive values are steeped in this liberal bastion that many believe California and the Bay Area to be. So I certainly think we'll see some of those arguments and some of those attacks. And to just build off of what Craig said, I think you're going to see two very different styles in Mike Pence, a very calm delivery, and for Senator Kamala Harris, she's a former prosecutor. We've seen her during the judiciary hearings. We've seen her as a prosecutor. We've seen her during the primary debates. She is going to come out, and I think she has to find a balance, again, to Craig's point, in terms of how do we hit the Trump administration for their handling of the coronavirus, but also being sensitive to the fact that the president continues to recover and the American people are waiting to see him recover in full.
Tom, I want to go back to you, though, just about the issues and the records at hand. You know, that we've seen the Trump campaign go after Senator Kamala Harris, that, you know, she will be the one leading the ticket, not Joe Biden. Just to repeat some of these campaign talking points, we've seen, especially with this big Supreme Court fight. I mean, remember, this was when Senator Kamala Harris really broke out into the mainstream and got her name recognition up there during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And I'm sure they'll go after Senator Harris also because, remember, she was competing against Joe Biden as a primary candidate and went after his record, too. So what are you looking for there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any time you have two candidates that competed against each other in the primaries, and then one of those candidates goes on to be the party nominee, you know, look at Joe Biden and Barack Obama back in 2008. You know, look at Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. You know, they have these primaries so the candidates can go after each other. Now, Mike Pence never ran against Donald Trump. Who knows what Donald Trump may have said about Mike Pence had Pence gotten into that race back in 2016. But, you know, heading into this, Kamala Harris has something at her disposal, which, if she sits down and watches it, will be an amazing piece of preparation for this vice presidential debate. And that is simply the videotape of the 2016 debate between Mike Pence and Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine put on a performance that night, which people are still talking about in this city. He interrupted, he complained, he just generally came off as not very likable to a large segment of the American people. And that didn't help when you had a party candidate like Hillary Clinton already struggling with image issues, you know, with the general public. If Harris can watch that tape of Kaine in 2016 and in large part, you know, just do everything that that was not, that's going to be a major step forward into her own introduction to this national television audience. Yes, a lot of people were watching the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Yes, a lot of people watched those primary debates. But this is different. This is a stage that Kamala Harris has never stood on before quite like this. So in large measure, it's going to be a way for her to introduce herself to the American people. And if she doesn't introduce herself to the American people, you can bet Mike Pence is going to be very ready to do that for her. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, how hard does Pence go in on this? You know, look, we talked about it. He's a former radio host before Mike Pence ever became Indiana governor, before he ever became a congressman, before he ever became vice president. He was a broadcaster. And when you are a broadcaster, you have certain tools at your disposal that maybe somebody who, even though she spent a lot of time in courtrooms as a prosecutor through the legal system, you know, Kamala Harris is no stranger to talking in front of people. But however, she's never commanded an audience the way Mike Pence has. So we're going to see two different skill sets on display here, and we'll be able to see, you know, which one gets the upper hand, you know, Mike Pence or Kamala Harris. This is going to be fascinating to watch.
And Craig, just feel free to jump in here. You know, obviously there are some precautions because of the coronavirus. They've agreed to do plexiglass at the podiums at the debate, a little further away on that stage as well. We'll see if Susan Page, the moderator, she's a USA Today columnist and reporter, will have as hard a time as Chris Wallace in actually moderating. But feel free to jump in on what Tom was saying, Craig.
You're going to have a very different kind of debate. You're not going to get the contentious back and forth that you had both weeks because the reviews were so horrible, and both sides know that. This will be more cordial. That much we can guarantee. In terms of plexiglass, yes, that's a barrier, but they're not going to be in hermetically sealed plexiglass boxes. Air can and will circulate, therefore, around walls. And so it does raise a question that both candidates may have to answer, particularly if it is asked during the debate. I go back to 1992's vice presidential debate when Admiral Stockdale comically asked, "Why am I here?" Well, they do have to maybe answer a question. Why are they even there? When Vice President Pence himself did interact with President Trump, and we're still in a 14-day window. If you look at CDC guidelines, when you were closely next to interacting with someone, then you quarantine for 14 days. Why is this not a case of do as I do, not as I say? That has to be raised, and the same goes for Senator Harris. Why is she even there in an age in which all of us are in different rooms all across the country? Why, given the situation we have, do they feel the need at this point to come together and proceed? That's part of it. Bouncing off of what Tom noted about Senator Harris, too, and the contrasting styles between them, there's a big wild card in terms of how well Senator Harris can perform. She has a very high upside and has vulnerabilities as well. We saw that in the national debates during the primaries. The first one in South Florida, for example, we saw Senator Harris take on former Vice President Biden, challenge his record on civil rights, his prior dealings years ago with segregationist senators and busing. It put Biden clearly on his heels and gave her a significant boost after that first debate. It shows she can score points off of then opponents. And then in a follow-up debate, Tulsi Gabbard, of all candidates, came after Senator Harris, challenging her on her record as a prosecutor, asserting that an innocent person remained in jail because perhaps she blocked evidence or that she put all these people away from minor marijuana convictions, while she smirked at the question of whether she had ever smoked marijuana herself. And in that moment, we saw that Senator Harris was flat-footed and was not well prepared when being attacked. So I'd like to hear more from Greg, because Greg has probably seen much more in her dealings and debates in California. But what we've seen on the national stage is that she can score points off an opponent, and an opponent can score points on her, maybe the equivalent of Arena League football, where you could have a high-scoring affair, particularly if it does get contentious.
And Greg, that's right. I mean, we don't know the list of issues or topics, it hasn't been released like it was in the first presidential debate. What comes to mind for me is we haven't heard anything yet on foreign policy, but as far as the issues are concerned, do you think it'll mostly be surrounding the coronavirus?
Yeah, Andrew, and I think to Craig's point, we know Kamala Harris does is she's very good at taking notes, and she's very good at turning those notes into attacks or turnarounds. She's clearly been doing her prep. She will have a lot of one-liners ready to go in response to Vice President Pence and his calm demeanor. But to go back to your question, Andrew, I think what we're going to see is what we saw Joe Biden do in that first debate, albeit in between attacks, which is pivoting often. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about the Supreme Court, finding ways to pivot back to the coronavirus and finding ways to talk about the administration's response to the coronavirus, heightened by the fact that the president is now battling the disease. And beyond that, I think for Mike Pence, being part of that task force and leading that task force, he will laud the administration's performance related to the coronavirus, trying to change the narrative a bit, and then turning it to other conservative issues, speaking more to those conservative voters and maybe those undecided voters that they are trying to attract. Issues like the Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett and what that means for conservative Christians and evangelicals, as well as shifting it to the economy and why they believe the Trump-Pence administration is most poised to build the country back from the economic downturn caused by the coronavirus. So I think, again, you're going to see two very contrasting styles, and it is going to be interesting to see who can get the other person back on their heels with an attack and perhaps create one of those moments where, in Joe Biden's case, he just turned to the president and said, "Will you shut up, man?" So I think we're going to see some of that, and it'll be interesting to see those dynamics play out, specifically in the fact that they're going to be inside kind of these plexiglass barriers.
And Greg, just to stick with you for final thoughts, you know, like we've been saying and we've been hearing, do you think this is the most important vice presidential debate that we'll see in modern times?
Oh, I absolutely do, because oftentimes by the time we get to the VP debate, it's kind of an afterthought. But the reality is, as we consider what will happen in the next couple of weeks, we are slated for another presidential debate on October 15th, October 22nd. We still don't know the status of those because we're waiting to see how President Trump proceeds in his recovery. So, worst case scenario, this could very much be the last debate that the American people see. In addition to the fact, people are already voting in many places throughout the country. I received my ballot this week. Californians are starting to vote early. So people are making their decisions, and for that small portion of American voters that are still undecided, they need to hear about the issues that are important to them, and this may be their best opportunity to do so.
And Craig, same question for you. Do you think this is the most important vice presidential debate we'll see?
Well, it's the most significant debate in my lifetime. Whether it moves the needle, that remains to be seen. There's the potential that there could be so many other turns of events between now and then that it may not have an impact. They seldom do. Looking back, none really have, except maybe 76 when Dole did Ford no favors. But there is significance in this debate, and in particular in reaching out to the few remaining persuadable and late deciding voters out there. There aren't many. Maybe it's effectively 3% or less, but Florida was decided by 1.2%. The key states in the upper Midwest, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, decided by less than 1%. So this is an opportunity for both the vice president and Senator Harris to reach out to those few voters who have not yet made up their mind, as few as there may be, who could play a significant role in the election. So it may not move the needle much, but just enough to swing the race.
And thank you, Craig, for that. And, you know, Tom, same question for you. Lastly, your thoughts, and is this the most important debate we'll see between two vice president running mates?
Well, you know, look, on that question, I've kind of had a change of mind this year. I have long believed and long said that people don't vote for vice presidents. They just don't. You might not be crazy about a vice president. Maybe it wasn't your first choice, but at the end of the day, every 4 years, when people go into that booth or, you know, pick up that ballot now or mail it or whatever they're going to do this year, they're voting for the president. With everything that's gone on just in the last 24 hours, I think this does significantly raise the stakes here. And, you know, that's not hyperbole, as we said at the start of this. You know, Mike Pence was being talked about in this city as maybe having to step in at one point and exercise the powers under the Constitution if he had to take the reins of the powers of the presidency as an acting president. So those stakes don't get any higher than this. But a couple of things to remember about each of these candidates. Through everything in the last 4 years, through all of the controversies, through all of the conflict, from all of the, you know, daily hubbub that makes this city spin around the politics that comes out of the White House, Mike Pence, in large part, has been a rock through all of this. He very rarely goes off course. He very rarely ever says anything that is off message. He might be one of the most disciplined politicians we have ever seen in this city. And that's saying a lot. And that's a big advantage to him going in. The problem for him is to not look robotic, to talk to the American people in the way that they're thinking right now, to not just spew the message points from the campaign, but to try to maybe show them another side of Mike Pence that they maybe haven't seen up until this point, because there are some people that look out at him and see a yes man. So Mike Pence in 2024 is probably going to be looking at this White House again with thoughts of his own political future. And that work starts in this next vice presidential debate. Because if Mike Pence has an intention of taking that Oval Office himself someday, he's going to have to start to make that connection when people see him as more than just a vice president, more than just a subordinate to Donald Trump. Now, on Kamala Harris's side, look, she's an unknown to a lot of people, even though us in the media talk about her all the time. The vice president is going to try to couch her as a liberal. He's going to try to couch her on crime. He's going to try to couch her as somebody who's been soft on some of the violence and the rioting that we've seen in these protests over the past couple of months. Harris probably needs to lean in on something that she hasn't wanted to talk about too much in this Democratic primary process and now this campaign. And that's her background as an attorney general and as a prosecutor. It's something she's really stepped back from because, you know, the left-wing liberal wing of that party, that's not really where a lot of their hearts and minds are on the left wing of the party right now. Kamala Harris might want to pick that up, dust that off, remind people that the felony rate in San Francisco was at 50% when she took office and 75%, you know, under her administration there. This is going to be, and you know, this is not to sound like the old sports analogy we talk about, but you put these two fighters in the ring. The Trump campaign is on the ropes right now. They've had a horrible couple of days. The president diagnosed with COVID in Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda. He flies back here to the White House. He's already getting more criticism over this video that he made, telling people not to be scared of the coronavirus, not to let it dominate them. The Biden campaign had been trying for weeks to get the messaging back on coronavirus, and that's exactly what they have right now. The Democrats could set up possibly a knockout blow here if Harris has a big night on Wednesday.
All right, interesting final thoughts from Fox 5's Tom Fitzgerald out of Washington, D.C., Fox 13 Tampa's Craig Patrick, and from Fox KTVU in San Francisco, Greg Lee. Thank you all so much, and keep it here on News Now from Fox for the vice presidential debate tonight.
Well, great information right there. Again, you're watching News Now from Fox. This is a live look from the debate stage right there. That is Susan Page. She's going to be moderating tonight's event. In Page's 47-year career, she's covered 10 presidential elections, 6 administrations, and interviewed 9 American presidents. She's going to have her work cut out for her tonight, though, Andrew.
That's right. Obviously, Susan Page is in herself kind of a Washington institution. She's been a columnist and reporter at the USA Today for years. Just recently, she wrote a great biography on former First Lady Barbara Bush. And I don't believe Susan Page has moderated a debate of this profile before.
And I feel like this is we're in a time where everything is unprecedented. You know, we had quite an interesting presidential debate last week. This one is sure to be a little wild as well, but hopefully a little more tame for all of you viewers out there.
That's right. Hopefully Susan Page doesn't have the time Chris Wallace had in wrangling the debaters themselves. Remains to be seen if Senator Harris and Vice President Pence will be a little more docile and a little tamer than their counterparts were last week.
Sure. Again, we don't know the questions that are going to be asked. Those are obviously kept a secret until right now. We are just minutes away from this debate. But, you know, Mike Pence, we were talking earlier, has practice with this. He used to be in radio. He can speak for long amounts of time, is very level. And then you have Senator Kamala Harris, who also has a lot of experience on that debate stage right there.
That's right. And we're just a minute out from this vice presidential debate. There'll be 9 topics for 10 minutes each. There'll be 90 minutes. You saw that coronavirus precautions are being taken with the plexiglass in place. Obviously, the 3 people on the stage won't be wearing masks. But yes, this is one of the highlights of the campaign season, with only 28 days left till November 3rd in the 2020 election.
And of course, remember, Mike Pence is the head of the coronavirus task force. He's going to be grilled with questions today, the handling of the coronavirus at the White House, considering the majority of his staff there now has the virus. Of course, Mike Pence doesn't have it. The CDC has cleared him to be there tonight, but precautions still are being taken, and it looks like there's a little bit of a crowd there.
There is, and probably mostly staff, family, and supporters, and we're just moments away from this vice presidential debate, obviously with the glaring backdrop of news that the president tested positive for the coronavirus over the weekend. Let's listen in. There's Susan Page.
Presidential debate of 2020, sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is my honor to moderate this debate, an important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Thank you.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The 2 campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that, and frankly, this administration has forfeited their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China, President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resource and support they needed. And we began, really, before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe, will have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, but
here.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
Yeah, you can have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the vice president a chance to
respond. So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you when your children couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
You know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. Now, that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also said to us, if we did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
Now, one
Pence,
life lost is too many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago, at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Thank you, Vice President
at
Pence.
that, if I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the
Vice
Green New
President Pence.
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader,
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker, knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked about
It is
this.
asking too much of the people. That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their parents and their children.
Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on to the issue of
but I would like to
vice
go back
presidency.
because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is it's just unacceptable. And let me also say, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu, 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud
Vice President Pence, I'm sorry,
of what we have done And Senator, please
Thank you, Vice
stop
President
undermining
Pence.
confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked
Sure.
Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of homeowners, to for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their President, and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher, but I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000?" And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest? So, Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency, because it has to be across the board. Joe has been incredibly transparent over many, many years. The one thing we all know about Joe, he puts it all out there. He is honest, he is forthright. But Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been about covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond, Vice President.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
But the American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But the distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you, Vice
and
President.
turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation,
Thank you,
unleashing
Vice
American
President
energy,
Pence.
fighting for free and fair trade, and all of that's
Thank you,
on the
Vice
line
President
if
Pence.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a
are in
good
the White
segue into our third
great
topic,
segue.
which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, Blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example, for folks who want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is it's about investing in the people of our country as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. Because when Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of four had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income for a family of four increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes. It's really remarkable to think, Susan. I mean, right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height, we've already added back 11.6 million jobs because we had a president who cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, fought for free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. We literally have spared no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. They want to bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland. And Joe Biden wants to go back to the economic surrender to China, that when we took office, half of our international trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth and opportunity, 4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait,
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
and it's
but
important
we need to give Vice President.
I'd just like to, he interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition, they're coming for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and to protect pre-existing conditions for every American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've provided the perfect segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the South. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the West. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our air and land are cleaner than any time ever recorded. Our water is among the cleanest in the world. And just a little while ago, the President signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation. And we've done it through natural gas and fracking, which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking. And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
There are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists
Pence,
use hurricanes and wildfires to try and sell their
Vice
bill of
President
goods
Pence.
of a Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put American jobs and American
Pence.
workers first.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human beings. Joe is about saying we're going to invest that in renewable energy. It's going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon neutral by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat?
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that on day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000 in tax relief to the average family of four across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website. And as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate Accord. Look, the American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue to cherish it. We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us to retrofit 4 million American business buildings. It makes no sense. It will cost jobs. President Trump is going to put America first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank you, Vice President. On the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris,
let's talk about that. The Vice President earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the President's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know. I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to
Well, I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China through over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic. But a Green New Deal, your massive new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I just need to respond very briefly.
15 seconds, and
Thank
then we'll move on.
Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. Is probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So now, with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again, the American people deserve to know Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was xenophobic.
Vice President Pence.
But President Trump has stood up to China. We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
We want to improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hold China accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, you know, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. Got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He has walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that, and they never did. We've stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific And we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, 2 of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other Beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look,
President.
we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President
terrorism.
Pence.
President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad
Thank you,
to do
Vice President
harm
Pence.
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is safer, our allies are safer, and the American people know President Donald Trump will never
Thank you,
hesitate
Vice President
to take
Pence.
action.
I would like to give Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length, because of course there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them? Because of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain, a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank you.
Joe Biden would, but Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And
Susan,
I want to make sure we have a chance
I really have to
talk
respond
about
to that.
I'm,
Look, she has
15 seconds because
well, I got to
we're
have
trying
more
to
than
keep,
that. Look,
well, I'm sorry, but Vice President Pence, you've had more time than she's had so far.
The slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice
My
President
son
Pence.
is a captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Vice
the American
President Pence,
people deserve, Susan,
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people deserve to know.
Vice President Pence, I did not, excuse me,
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you, which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Yes. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before. The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable, because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She's a brilliant woman, and she will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
So
Your
my
time
hope
is
that
up.
when the hearing takes place,
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
that Judge Amy Coney Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President
respectfully,
Pence.
voted and confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United States.
Senator Harris, you're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I said it before, and it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. Yeah. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums.
Thank you, Senator
Let's
Harris.
Lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true
Harris.
leadership.
You know, you mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president says, President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. And it was 27 days before the election. And a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And the
Senator
American
Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
the
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got to
I
tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question.
Thank you.
But I think
Thank
the
you.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is a time for leadership on a tragic, tragic issue of unarmed black people in America who have been killed.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. and the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. It was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist. And that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African Americans.
Thank you, Vice President
Record unemployment, record investments in education, and we'll fight for school choice for all of our minorities.
Thank you, Vice President.
I'd like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
not true.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the President of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris,
and recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we all have so much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California.
Yeah.
You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We fought
Pence.
for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our members.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank
years.
you. You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only.
Thank you, Senator
I
Harris.
would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because, yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. And I'd like to pose I'd like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy and to fight for the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military, we revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing American energy. We appointed conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And we stood with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think that movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last 4 years. But when you talk about accepting the outcome of the election, I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then, Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, how are the citizens supposed to get along?" And then she added, "Your examples could make all the difference to bring us together," end quote. So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that. And it's how we've created literally the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world. But I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States, one very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the 2 of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people, and the American people each and every day. Love a good debate. We love a good argument, but we always come together and are always there for one another.
Thank you,
in
Vice
times of
President.
need, and we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright, because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be that is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him, like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19. The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a town hall style debate in Miami. We hope you'll join us then. Good evening.
All right.
Well, there you have it. We're both so excited. It's the 2020 vice presidential debate. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, it was a little more civil than last week. You're seeing Senator Harris's husband there, Doug, and the second lady, Karen Pence. They're waving to the crowd. First reactions, though, Susan Page also had a hard time keeping time, telling them both that they really needed to respect each other's time or respect the rules that they agreed to. Obviously, nowhere near compared to last week's debate. Big takeaways, though, Daytona. A lot of time I didn't really think that either one of them answered the questions directly. They kind of took the question that Susan Page asked and went their own way with it a lot of the times.
Yeah, you saw Mike Pence several times kind of sidestepping, going back to previous questions. He couldn't really get everything in that he wanted to. Obviously, very different still than President Trump, who didn't really let Joe Biden speak at all. But yeah, definitely a lot of dancing around questions.
Definitely. And you know what? We do have a live report with some reaction from Fox's own Madeline Rivera. She's been watching the debate. She's there in Salt Lake City. And we want to go over to her right now with her first thoughts and her first reactions. Maddie, your first thoughts.
Hey, Andrew.
What is the Biden campaign saying? How did they think Senator Harris did?
Well, as you mentioned, Andrew, I think this was a much different tone than what we saw last week. It was much more civil, like you mentioned, not a lot of talking over each other. There were some moments, though, but there was still a lot of pivoting, you know, even though it was a lot more subdued tone. There were many times when both Harris and Pence didn't really answer Susan Page's question and would just kind of pivot to whatever they wanted to talk about. So I think the American voters, though, did get a little bit more and understood a little bit more of their position as compared to last week. But yeah, just a totally different tone compared to last week's debate, Andrew.
And Maddie, obviously much more substantive than last week as well. They covered a number of topics, but wanted to talk mostly about this issue of court packing. Still didn't get a clear answer from Senator Harris, still haven't gotten a clear answer from Joe Biden. What did you make of that? And do you think possibly that the Trump campaign will roll with that in these next 27 days, that they're just not answering this question on court packing?
I'm sure we can expect to see the Trump campaign continue to press Biden and Harris on this issue. Biden, I don't think, will sway from what he said in the past. He hasn't wanted to answer this question before because he doesn't want to make a big issue out of it, because he says if he does answer that question, then you won't hear the end of it from Trump or Pence talking about this issue. So he largely wants to avoid that, and I think that's a little bit of what Harris is trying to do as well. But I'm sure a lot of critics will point to that and say, well, she didn't answer the question here, leaving some room as to what could possibly happen down the road and whether or not they will shift on this subject. So I do think that they will probably pounce on that issue, but I don't think that you will see Pence or rather Harris or Biden really touch that issue, Andrew.
No, Maddie, obviously the coronavirus was a big topic in the beginning. There was questions asked about that. But did you think it was going to be a bigger topic with everything that's going on right now, especially in the Trump administration?
No, I mean, we knew that coronavirus was going to lead off this conversation. I mean, just look at the debate setting, right? With the plexiglass set between the two candidates, COVID-19 has kind of dominated, especially Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis. That topic has kind of dominated the tone of the debate. So I'm not really surprised by that, the conversation was led off by that topic. But, you know, they wanted to get they wanted to touch on a whole range of issues. So I'm not surprised that they touched on Supreme Court. I'm not surprised that they touched on the economy. What I am surprised about, though, was that Harris said, or rather her advisor said, she didn't really want to play fact-checking. She didn't want to play a fact-checking role here, but I found that she was actually doing more fact-checking than she thought she probably would be. For example, Pence hit her on some of Biden's plans, saying that Biden would raise taxes on people making more than $400,000. Harris checked him on that. So that was just one instance where Harris kind of stepped out of her role a little bit and decided to, call Pence out, which her advisors had said would be the challenge here, is to call Pence out, especially when he kind of pre-packages or packages his statements in really eloquent sentences that it's kind of hard to catch them if you don't listen hard enough, Daytona.
And Maddie, that's right. Obviously, Pence adopts a more kind of sedate, tame tone compared with Senator Harris's really fiery zingers. I want to just read some of them that were said. If you remember that she said, talking about the China trade deal, you lost that trade war. She repeatedly invoked and it even was trending on Twitter, this refrain of "I'm speaking" when the Vice President Pence kind of was interjecting and not letting her finish. So, and as you mentioned again too, Maddie, that she was looking directly at the American people, much like Joe Biden was doing at last week's debate. So, and your thoughts on that, and also what is in store for the Biden campaign coming up this week?
Well, I feel like she definitely practiced that line saying, well, I'm speaking, Mr. Vice President. I think that's something that she wanted to at least emphasize her role here. She wanted to, she obviously has a background as a prosecutor, so she wanted to showcase a little bit of her toughness here. But in terms of what's Up next for the Biden and Harris ticket, they'll be heading to Arizona tomorrow, hoping to shore up some support among Hispanic voters. That's really a state that Biden and Trump really have been going after. It's a battleground state, so they're hoping that by going to that state, they can shore up some more minority voters who could be key in that state, Andrew.
All right, Fox's Madeline Rivera live for us in Salt Lake City, Utah, giving us all the recap of what you just saw watching that vice presidential debate. Want to take it over now, though. The dignitaries are leaving the University of Utah Kingsbury Hall. Let's watch that. We just saw one of the motorcades leave. And as Maddie mentioned, Vice President Biden and Senator Harris will be in Arizona tomorrow, Las Vegas on Friday. You know, the president is still recuperating in the West Wing, in the residence. Don't really know yet about Mike Pence's schedule going forward, but it's 27 days before the election.
And Andrew, obviously an empty debate stage right there, but social media is trending right now with this debate, and it always has been for the past hour and a half or so as it was going. So we're going to take you to some of the reaction coming out online, which is always exciting. Let's take a look at this. So like we just spoke about with Maddie there, you know, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. That was coming from Senator Kamala Harris several times throughout the debate.
And even the president tweeting in the middle of the debate saying Mike Pence is doing great. She is a gaffe machine, obviously echoing the oft-cited Biden line that he has a lot of gaffes as well.
Sure.
Here we go, Joe Biden. Touting Kamala Harris's performance, showing the American people why I chose her as my running mate. She's smart, she's experienced, she's a proven fighter for the middle class. She'll be an incredible vice president.
This just showing how important social media is. You saw people going off during the debate. You even saw Kamala Harris's account tweeting while she was up there on stage. So people are tuning in and trying to find those big moments from the debate.
That's right. And there was obviously a big back and forth on this factoid of the Biden campaign. Obviously, Kamala Harris was really reiterating this fact that Joe Biden and her are not going to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. Vice President Mike Pence kept reiterating this also oft-cited phrase. I think it was from Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of the state of New York, where you're entitled to your own set of facts, but not your own set of opinions. Or I'm sorry, vice versa.
Yes.
You're entitled to your own set of opinions, but not your own set of facts. So both of them hitting that really hard.
And bringing in Craig Patrick from our very own Fox 13. We heard from him a little bit earlier, but he goes, Pence and Harris both lose points for deflecting questions on what people should know about nominees' health. Harris's deflection to taxes made her dodge more obvious, and that was my first takeaway as well. Lots of dodged questions. Say what you want about the presidential debate. They were kind of addressing the questions.
Right, and this question in particular is especially relevant right now, obviously with both presidents in their 70s. President Trump currently facing recovery from the coronavirus. So the reason that they couldn't answer that question directly, I thought was striking given the age of their running mates.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously social media just taking off. Another tweet out here, Pence's response to the question, did Breonna Taylor receive justice, was disgusting. This is obviously just the general public now weighing in on exactly what was going on. And of course, we knew Breonna Taylor was going to be a topic of discussion.
That's right. Senator Harris bringing up George Floyd as well, citing her record as a prosecutor in California. So this is from Fox 11's Alex Michelson tweeting a gif there. Don't the debate moderators need an air horn to stop the candidates when they go over time? And obviously this debate was much more civil than the last presidential debate, but still a lot of interruptions, a lot of interjections. I thought Susan Page handled herself well, but she can only control so much, right, when they want to go over time.
Sure. This one from Alyssa Milano. More than 400,000 small businesses have closed for good, and Trump-Pence administration actions have combined to shutter factories, eliminating hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs. Again, just a big topic tonight. Small businesses, health care, everything along those lines.
And the Libertarian Party, tweeting, "So we're just not going to get any answers tonight, are we?" And I feel like that was a lot of the sentiment on social media, where really great questions by Susan Page that were either not addressed or were deflected. And even former Democratic primary candidate Andrew Yang tweeting, "Right now the GOP is checking to see if Pence can replace Trump for the remaining debates." Obviously, that's a strain of thought on social media that Pence is a better steward for the Trump administration than Trump himself.
Yeah, so exciting reaction right there online. One of the biggest things I think from the debate was how long is that fly gonna stay on Mike Pence's head?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone watching at home also noticed that, but a fly landed on top of the head of the vice president, and it stayed there for quite some time. It was trending on Twitter and such, but just we were watching for funny moments like that.
Yeah, you got to get a laugh in, right? All right, we're going to watch some of the moments that we've highlighted from the debate that we thought were big deals. So this first one right here was right off the top, talking about the vaccine, but also the swine flu and what Pence said the Obama administration did wrong with that.
Let's listen to that right now.
We actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine. We actually do know what failure looks like.
Yeah, Daytona, we were just watching there, one of the first answers in the vice presidential debate about vaccine progress and the coronavirus. Pence hammering the former administration of Obama and Biden on their swine flu response. A lot of people taking issue with that on social media, that the swine flu is not as deadly as the coronavirus, so it's not much of an apt comparison. But Pence saying Biden in the Obama administration, they did not prepare themselves, the Trump administration, for a pandemic like this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Pence bringing in 60 million people got swine flu under Obama administration, that it was just as deadly, if not more, than the coronavirus. So kind of an interesting tie-in right there.
That is, and I don't remember if you recall, but the vice president brought up Ron Klain, who said that they did everything wrong with swine flu. You remember Ron Klain was Barack Obama's czar of the Ebola pandemic, and now serves as an advisor to the Biden campaign.
Yeah,
so,
everything comes full
good
circle.
debate prep from the vice president there.
Yeah, also, I mean, the use of disaster, both sides, that stuck out to me. Pence says Obamacare, it was a disaster, it's a disaster. Kamala Harris calls the current economy a disaster. So both of them kind of using similar attack methods to go back and forth at each other.
That's right, this catastrophic language that they're both deploying. Let's listen to the next highlight.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science.
So obviously, as you saw right there, bringing in climate change, which typically is something that the Biden campaign has been very upfront about. This policy obviously kind of turned on Pence, one of those topics that he dodged, quite frankly.
Yeah, and that's right. And Susan Page, a little bit later in that exchange, really asked Senator Harris about the platform point in the Biden platform about the Green New Deal, and that they want a plan that is a framework of the Green New Deal, not an identical copy. And so she was trying to get some clarification on that from the Biden campaign. Obviously, fracking came up a lot. The vice president kept reiterating to Senator Harris that fracking would be banned if Biden became president. She countered that fracking will still happen in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. So that was a major back and forth with fracking, because fracking does employ a lot of Americans, and it's a way to get natural gas cheaply, but he was really hammering her on that.
All right, switching gears a little bit into a topic of foreign relations, which is something that, conversely, the Trump administration has been very out front about. So let's take a listen to that.
Look, she has
15 seconds, because
well, I got to have
trying
more
to
than
keep,
that. Look,
well, I'm sorry, but Vice President Pence, you've had more time than she's had so far.
Slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice President Pence.
My son is a captain in the United States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
The American people deserve, Susan, the American people deserve to know.
Vice President Pence, I did not, excuse me,
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you, which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court.
So that right there, arguably the most fiery part of the debate, apart from the fly on Pence's head.
That's right. That was an instance where we really saw Susan Page go after both of them for interrupting, saying, your campaigns agreed to this, please abide by it. But that specific exchange was on foreign policy, respect for troops, the vice president hammering Joe Biden on his reluctance to act. He brought up this case of, the vice president when they initiated the operation to kill Osama bin Laden. The vice president Joe Biden at the time was hesitant to do that. He was hesitant to strike an al-Baghdadi. He even blamed the Biden-Obama administration for the death of Kayla Mueller. So that was really striking to see. And then Harris countered and brought up that Atlantic story from about a month ago where Donald Trump, sources said he referred to people in the military as suckers and losers for volunteering to go to war. So both of them really going back and forth on that.
And then another aspect I thought was interesting was Pence making it personal, talking about his son who does serve in the military, which is similar to what Joe Biden did in the presidential debate. You'll remember he was talking about his son who also serves in the military. So something that we haven't really seen as much from Pence. He's very even keel. This time making it a little more emotional and humanizing himself to the American public and voters.
That's right. And what I was surprised that wasn't brought up on Senator Harris's part was her relationship with Beau Biden. They served as attorneys general together, she in California, he in Delaware, and she often invokes his memory. Obviously, he was a member of the Delaware National Guard and served overseas. Surprised that Beau Biden and his memory didn't come up as well.
Definitely interesting. I want to bring it back to the Supreme Court nominee. That was obviously a big topic today at the debate, so let's listen into that.
Biden has refused to answer the question, so I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864.
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. And it was 27 days before the election. And a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And
Senator
the
Harris.
People, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
the
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got to
I
tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's
Surprisingly, that still Senator Harris and the Biden campaign have not clarified what their stance is on court packing. You know, if, say, the vice president were to win the election, still not even clear if he would even have the Democratic votes in the Senate to add another seat on the Supreme Court. That's what you need. And Mike Pence really putting the question to Senator Harris, bypassing Susan Page completely and saying, what will you tell the American people? Do you support the separation of powers? Do you support the Supreme Court? That was a dodge.
Yeah, and you saw that a couple times from him throughout the debate, kind of taking the reins, becoming moderator, asking her questions from across the double plexiglass.
That's right. And that was also kind of dovetailing into a question on Judge Amy Coney Barrett. We saw Senator Harris kind of give this history lesson of when a Supreme Court vacancy opened up near the end of Abraham Lincoln's first term in 1864, and she was citing the fact that Lincoln is your favorite president, Vice President Mike Pence.
Honest Abe.
Honest Abe, yeah, and she said, you know, he waited until the election to announce the nomination. So I thought that was really interesting, but also questions of faith too, speaking about the Supreme Court. You know, both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in her own words, said they're practicing members of faiths, Joe Biden Catholic, and she said that was insulting when Vice President Mike Pence suggested otherwise.
Right, so kind of the gist of all this, we had the vice presidential debate. I think a lot of people are still left with a lot of unanswered questions. Lots of dancing going on tonight, but, you know, still probably better than what we saw during the presidential debate. Now we want just a couple more reaction shots. We've got one coming from Joe Biden himself. Kamala, you made us all proud tonight. He was very supportive of her on Twitter, tweeting out right before the debate a little gif of them kind of walking in, a little pre-game pump up, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and we'll be watching for all the reaction on the vice presidential debate here on News Now from Fox. Next week, October 15th, the next presidential debate will be held in Miami, Florida. That will be a town hall format. And you know, Daytona, at this point, I just cannot say for certain if that's even going to happen.
Yeah, I guess that's something we're just going to hear. Every single day there's more developing details. And we just heard from Joe Biden, what was that, yesterday? Telling reporters that, hey, you know, if he's still infected, I don't think I'm going on stage. So yes, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and we want to just thank everyone who watched tonight, the pre-show, the debate, and the post-show. This is News Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft.
And I'm Daytona Everett.
Thanks for watching, and we're going to play out the debate for you a little later in its entirety. Thank you for watching.
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
You know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. And that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also said
Vice
to us,
President
if we
Pence.
did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
Now, one
Pence.
life lost is
Thank
too
you.
many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first
Thank you, Vice
responders.
President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a